So perhaps one of the most interesting mysteries heading into the 2020 season is how good is Ben Roethlisberger going to be? Well, let's basically just go back and talk about the last time we really saw him, which was in the disaster of opening week against New England. Of course, he played a few snaps in week 2 as well, but this was the only full game he played in 2019, and it didn't go particularly well for him. However, if you watch the tape, it wasn't really his fault too much. It really was just the receivers getting shut down by the New England players' defensive backs. Like on this play, for example, it's going to be man coverage, which is what New England would do a lot. It's a cover one man play, which is also this is pretty much right in the this is the first page of the New England playbook. This is the play they love to run, and for a good reason, because their corners and defensive backs are very good. And watch how right when the ball is snapped, there's not a lot open. I mean, 3 of these routes are definitely not open. There is one route, though, right there that could be open. There's some separation there. There's a receiver who's stopping in front. He could potentially get open. This wasn't Roethlisberger's first read. However, he did do a good job of figuring out that the other 3 routes weren't open, getting onto this route, and making a throw in that direction. Unfortunately, his receiver wasn't able to make the play, but it was a good play by Roethlisberger, and it wasn't really his fault that things went wrong. That was Moncrief who missed the play, and he got open, but then he wasn't able to finish, and that's kind of a lot of what happened. Was there really wasn't a lot of really much separation whatsoever, So basically, the reason why I'm saying all this is because watching that one play, it's not really a reason to be worried about Ben Roethlisberger, and the game itself wasn't really his fault. It was a small sample size as well, just one game, so I wouldn't really take that much stock into it. What I do think could actually be a significant decrease, however, was the lack of Antonio Brown. A big reason why they lost that game was because they didn't have Antonio Brown and Juju. They only had Juju. And listen, Antonio Brown may be off the wall and currently feuding with Logan Paul and somehow losing that feud, but he was an incredible wide receiver. And, without him, it does kind of make things more difficult, like on this play. It's again man coverage. This time it's kind of a buzz concept, meaning that the end zone is totally, open for the taking. You just have to be able to win your own one-on-one matchup once you get there. And after the ball is snapped, you're going to notice that. So there is some separation, but it's not a ton of separation. And it's tough for Roethlisberger because he can't really throw a line drive, which would be ideal because there's so many other New England players in front. So he is going to have to kind of lob this up to some degree. But the problem is that this is Moncrief going up against McCourtney, and this is just not going to go over too well. He throws one up. McCourtney is able to win this one-on-one battle. And, I think that's a fair thing to be concerned about. Maybe lack of weapons. In fairness, they did, make some additions. The most notable one, Chase Claypool, who they drafted in the second round, who I think will be very good. He should be very good. But, again, there's a problem with that as well. And it's the fact that I'm not sure if they will have great chemistry just right when they start. Simply because, it's hard to get that chemistry, especially with the COVID. Now you're going to have even less time to get chemistry because you have less training camp and less time together. And chemistry is a real thing. Like, take a look at this play. It's going to be James Washington running a route towards the top of the screen against man coverage. It's a route that can get open pretty well. And that's where Roethlisberger is going to want to throw the ball to. However, after the ball is snapped, you notice that there's pressure right away, and also it's impossible to tell if Washington's going to get open or not. So, if they have that chemistry and Roethlisberger trusts Washington, he probably would lob one up a little bit further towards the sideline, let Washington try to go over and make the play. But instead, he's just going to throw it away because he just doesn't, he throws it. It's hard to say if that's really a true throwaway or if he just missed on it. I think it was, honestly, either way, it all comes back to chemistry. Because if it was a throwaway, it's because he didn't trust Washington when he should have. And if it wasn't a throwaway, well, then clearly he just doesn't have the timing down with Washington. So either way, chemistry is a real thing. And again, Washington, he only played a little bit with Ben Roethlisberger prior to this game. He played most of last season, but again, they're going to have to get the chemistry down. And even with Juju Smith-Schuster, it's been a minute since they played together now. They might have to get some of that chemistry back. Let's talk about Juju because, a lot of people, it was kind of a narrative before this season of can Smith-Schuster become the number one receiver for Pittsburgh? And that thing kind of got delayed with Roethlisberger being out for the whole season. But can he be a number one receiver? Well, he certainly has big playability. Like, take a look at this play. What's going to happen is that it's a one-on-one matchup. He's going to be running a deep route. Pretty simple, but, they're backed up here. So Roethlisberger, he can't risk anything. He's going to have to get the ball off relatively quickly. However, there's good news, and it's that Smith-Schuster gets open very quickly, cuts back just enough to the inside to where he can get separation, and from this point, he's just off. He's able to run, he's able to break a tackle, and he's going to get a touchdown on this play, which is just a really dominant play, and it was one of the most dominant plays of that season. This is obviously 2 years ago. And so, you watch that play and you're like, okay, this guy has the tools to be a number one receiver. Nobody who makes that play can't be a number one receiver, and I think he totally can be. Now, is he Antonio Brown? I would say no, not yet, but Antonio Brown was a really good football player. I also think that his quote-unquote down season was a bit overblown last year. It definitely did drop off to some degree. But if you look at his yards per snap, he averaged 1.49 yards per snap 2 years ago, and then last year it was 1.36. So, I know that's kind of, no one really uses that stat, but if you acted as though everyone got 50 snaps in a game, which is about what you would expect a receiver to get. This would mean that on average, last year he got 60 yards a game, and on average 2 years ago, it was 74.5 yards per game, which is something. I'm not trying to say it's not something, but I just don't know if it's a huge disastrous thing, especially when you consider who was throwing to him last year. Okay, so I've talked a good amount about the situation as a whole, but what I really want to talk about now is just Big Ben himself, and can he come back from the injury? It's hard to know exactly, but what we can do is talk about what his skill set is and how it potentially could be negatively affected because of the injury. And one of the things that jumps out at me is mobility. It's not like he's Lamar Jackson, but he will use his mobility, typically just to extend plays. Every now and then the scramble, like on this play, it's zone coverage, and he's not going to like what he sees, mostly because Carolina is playing very far off here. They don't want to give up a big play because they have been giving up big plays all night in this game. And so because of this, once the ball is snapped, you're going to notice that Roethlisberger, he sees that there's a clear opening that he can try and run for, but it's not like this massive opening. If he can get past the offensive line and defensive linemen, he could probably gain some yards, but it's going to be tough. And both defensive linemen are going to read this pretty well and try to make a tackle. But again, watch how difficult it is to bring him down. He got touched for, there was contact like 10 yards prior to where he eventually went down. And that's just the kind of thing about Roethlisberger. He's 6'5", 240 pounds. He's not an easy guy to bring down by any means. So, the reason I'm bringing that up is, of course, because if he does get injured, maybe he will be less likely to want to take those hits and to want to, keep fighting when there is contact. Maybe he'll go down quicker. It's hard to imagine Ben Roethlisberger doing that, just knowing what we know about him. But maybe if it's bad enough, he would do that. And it would be smart to do that if it is bad enough. So it's one thing you could potentially worry about. I think another thing you could worry about is just simply, how he is in terms of his gunslinger mentality. He will definitely try to fit the ball through tight windows from time to time. He will throw up those jump balls. And so there's definitely some concern that, hey, if his accuracy is just a little bit off, it could be a bad thing because he led the league in interceptions the last time we saw him. Maybe it could end up being a bad thing again. Like what I really mean is something like this, where it's a one-on-one matchup with Antonio Brown, who's running a deep route. I know Brown's not there, but that's not really important to why I'm showing this play, because what you're going to see is right after the ball is snapped, Brown is not open at all. There is no separation. But Roethlisberger, he has the mindset of, I'm going to take chances. I'm going to see what I can do, and I'm going to throw this and see if it works out. And Brown doesn't get necessarily too open, but it's just a really good throw, and that results in a touchdown. Brown does do a good job of finishing, but for the most part, that was just a good throw from Roethlisberger, and I think that, again, there is a concern there. If his arm strength isn't as big, this is someone who relies on throwing the ball deep down the field. I'm pretty heavily so. In 2018, when he threw the ball further than 20 yards down the field. His completion percentage, not particularly great, 30 for 87, definitely on the low side, even for that far down the field. But he had 15 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. So a lot of his interceptions came a lot closer, actually, not those further plays, which was also exactly 1,100 yards, which led to a 112.9 passer rating, which, again, obviously you expect the passer rating to be higher when you're throwing it down the field. It's going to be higher most of the time. But the fact that it's that high is definitely impressive because, again, this wasn't the best season for him. His passer rating, taking out passes over 20 yards down the field, was just 91.3. So it's getting over 20 points higher when he throws the ball down the field. Throwing the ball down the field is a big part of Roethlisberger's game. So again, we don't know what really the impact is going to be when he comes back from his injury, but if he can't throw the ball down the field, I'm not sure if he's the kind of player that can still be okay. One thing I also should mention is that there's been some talk about all the weight he's gained and how he's out of shape. This picture surfaced about a month ago, so I think looking at him there, he seems like he's in pretty fine shape. I don't think it's going to be a problem. So yeah, I guess I'll end this video by saying, listen, it's a risk. I mean, that's really the reality of the situation. We all like to predict things so we feel smart afterwards, but the reality is nobody knows if Roethlisberger's going to be great next year or terrible next year. But there's definitely a legitimate chance he can be back to the form he was, and I think if he is, there might still be some problems, but not a ton. I think the Steelers could definitely be back to a playoff team if Roethlisberger comes back and is healthy and is 100%. And I think there could be some real problems if he isn't 100%, which is why I think it's so interesting. So let me know, what do you guys think? Do you think he's going to get a full recovery or not? I always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.